Thanks for dialing in. Welcome to the second of our quarterly webinars. Lots to get through, so I'll begin straight away. First of all, some introductions. This is me. I'm in charge of communications. I'll just be leading the initial parts of the webinar and then handing over to my colleagues at GWO. I'm joined today by Jakob Bjørn Nielsen, who's Head of Standards Development.
Hi, everybody.
And shortly we will be joined by Jakob Lauholst, who's dialing in from Spain today. He's actually just looking for a room to dial into. He's hosting our auditor qualification training in Madrid, which I'm sure he'll be able to explain more about to you later on. So, our agenda for the day. First of all, we published the first half report last week. And we've had lots of good feedback and plenty of downloads from the website and lots of interest in that. So we'll go through some of the numbers and what they mean. Then I'll hand over to Jakob Bjørn, who will give you an update on the standards development and training committee activities here at GWO. And then we'll move on to what's coming up in 2019, the end of 2019, and also looking into the new year, and then we'll be open for questions towards the end. And as I said, questions can just be written into the browser, so just go ahead and fill out those as and when anything pops up. Obviously, the more questions we have, the more chance there is of us being unable to answer them all, but we'll do our best to come back to everybody after the event if necessary. Okay. So the market report, the first half report of numbers from the GWO Winder database. Many of you will have seen this graphic already. It shows the number of workers with a valid GWO training record in Winder. So this is an important number. It gives us a guiding light as to the direction of travel for GWO training around the world. As you can see, it's steadily moving up, and there are an additional just under 10,000 people added in the first half of this year. So we look forward to seeing how that moves up in the second half, and to see if we can start applying some more reliable trends. It's still early days. Winder's only been in operation since October 2016, so we're just coming up to the third anniversary. So with every half year, with every quarter, we know more about the system and what kind of values it can deliver to the industry. The number of certificates is interesting, paints an interesting picture, because this time around, about 10% of the big number in the bottom left that you see, 107,000, now comes from modules that are outside the basic safety training standards. So that's coming from basic technical training, it's coming from advanced rescue, enhanced first aid, and you know, we anticipate that that's going to be an increasing trend. As you can see, the growth versus the corresponding half year is also improving. So the first half of 2018 against the first half of 2017 resulted in a 17% increase, whereas this time around we're looking at a 26% increase. As many of you know, the training that's carried out by GWO providers is seasonal, so that's why the half years can't necessarily be compared to one another like with like. So we have to go against the corresponding half years. And this graphic shows you, it explains exactly what I just said, which is, you know, it demonstrates how there are peaks in the first half of each year, particularly in the first quarter of each year. So around about March, April is the busiest time for GWO training, particularly BST. While I'm on the subject here, we've noticed, we haven't got the graphics here, but it's in the report, that there's an increasing ratio of people who are refreshing their training. So the first half of 2017, the ratio between basic safety training main courses and refreshers was about 70-30. Now it's closer to 60-40, and that's a steadily changing trend. BTT is an interesting story as well. As you can see, the take-up of those standards has increased rapidly in the last 6 to 8 months. Without the refresher cycle, these are unique individuals, essentially. So we now have approximately 3,000 people with a BTT record. And we look forward to seeing how that changes over time as more training providers become certified. And as I said, the modules outside of BST are now really contributing to the overall training makeup of the workforce. And as you can see, more than 2,000 advanced rescue training records were uploaded to Winder in the second quarter of 2019, and just over 500 enhanced first aid. Excluding, there are also merit records going into the system, but for the purposes of our reporting, we've excluded all merit records from this data and all of the other graphics that you've seen. These numbers would actually be higher if we included those. And finally, we look at the picture around the world as to how and what is contributing to this growth. And as you can see, the European market is still dominating. The numbers in the small white arrow boxes represent the number of records that have been uploaded within that region. So you can see almost 90,000 of the total is coming from Europe. So the total was 107,000. So that leaves 17 or 18,000 records have been uploaded into Winder from training providers outside of Europe. And that's a really interesting story, and one we hope to see develop over the coming years. As you can see, the numbers have shown a steady increase in the first half in every single region. But obviously starting from a lower base, you would see, you'd expect to see that. But the number of new training providers in the first half of this year, we don't have a graphic for that, but it's in the report, is an additional 35. And we're continuing to see those numbers increase in the third quarter. And we'll provide an update on third quarter numbers towards the end of October, early November at the earliest, hopefully. So please keep an eye out on our website and stay in touch with us via the newsletter for information on when that's going to be published. So that's about it for the first half report. If you've got any questions about the numbers, please put them in the question box, as we said, and you can always get in touch with us via our info@globalwindsafety.org email address, and we'll do our best to answer your questions and help you out in any way we can. So now I'm going to pass on to Jakob Björn. He's going to give you an update on all of the work that's been carried out in the last 3 months at the training department here at GWX. So, Jakob, over to you, mate.
Cool. Thank you, and thank you for everyone joining in to listen to what we do here. I would like to start with kind of how we work, because I think it's good to present the principles behind how we create training standards before we actually kind of share what we developed. So it gives a sense of understanding, at least for the principles that we deal with. So first and foremost, what you have in front of you is a quite traditional model when it comes to learning retention. So it's clear that when you read something, you can remember so and so much of it. If you hear it, etc. And I guess this is the point where I kind of start to look at myself and think, okay, we're doing a webinar. How much will you remember of it? But it's actually also a good thing, because it also motivates the fact that GWO wants to engage. So us telling you right now how we work, that's good, but we would really like to go into the green, where we participate in discussions, we do the real thing, and we actually engage with each other actively. Could it be in a seminar or training development, whatever it is.
Yeah, what Jakob's actually doing is trying to invite you to more events.
Yeah,
and come and see
working groups, that'll be great.
Yeah.
But as you can see, there's a different ratio of what you remember. And so there's passive, and then there's active learning realms, you could say. And what we're kind of going at is these percentages is what you remember 2 weeks after you listen to me or Ralph or somebody else or attended a meeting at your company. On the other hand, you will remember 70% of what you did when you participated in the discussion with a good friend, a colleague, or somebody at your site. So what we're dealing with here, from a GWO standpoint, is that we want to be in the green area. We want to make sure that the learning retention rate is high. Therefore, we always go for a high level of practical elements, and that's actually the main reason for me showing this. When we develop our training standards, we focus on bringing all we can into the active learning realm, because it's where it sticks. CSURvival is a good example. You can put people into a room, you can talk about what's in the kit of a life raft, but if you ask them to open the kit while they're sitting in a life raft in either a pool or in the ocean, they will remember because their fingers are cold. They have all these stimulances to their brain telling them this is important. So that's kind of the background for what we want. And we have a goal saying we would need at least 70% to be in the practical realm, and then maximum of 30 to be in the theory realm, or the he or she, etc. And I'm actually quite proud that the last couple of training standards we put out were around the 80-20 mark. So I'm really happy about that. All right, so I probably need to go into the presentation here so I can click on. There we go. And what I want to show now is the Sling A Signaler. So first of all, I think it's important to kind of share the motivation for developing a training standard like this. It's been rated really highly in the risk register, which is a function that we have where we consult our members and we investigate, well, which areas are you struggling in? Where do you have accidents? Where do you foresee that there are potential hazards and risks? And then we have a ranking of all these different areas. Luckily, in most of those areas, we already have training standards, but we had a gap in the Sling A Signaler area. So we're setting in there and kind of see if we can mitigate the situation in the wind industry. Another thing is it's really it's a dream case for standardization, in the sense that if you look around in Europe, North America, Latin America, China, otherwhere, you have, and adding them all up would just be an insane task, but you have hundreds of different training standards dealing with this area.
And one of the biggest differences was that even the language, the hand signals, was different between the different training standards, right?
It is. I think the most important part with the hand signals is that when you do this in real life, that everybody agrees on what hand signals are we using, what language are we dealing with, how do we communicate, etc. Of course, with the training standard, we provide a suggestion as to what that could be, but that's always up to the duty holder. But going back to the fact that you have so many different training standards in this area, some of them divided into beginner, intermediate, advanced, etc. And it's actually a real struggle for the duty holders out there when you have an employee coming and say, well, I have this, is this good enough? Can you qualify this according to your training framework? And providing a baseline in the GWO Sling A Signaler, we see that as pretty exciting, actually.
Yeah, it's a case study for the value of GWO standardization. Is the perfect example of why it's necessary, right?
It is. I mean, minimize retraining, etc. It's of course also a complex area, so we kind of stayed in the basic safety area of it. So we're not trying to kind of move into heavy lifting or anything like that. We're dealing with the man putting something on a hook and then directing the crane in a very let's call it basic way, but I'll get back to that.
And just as you point out, a basic way, we are holding another webinar next week to provide training providers with full details of the training standards themselves. As an introduction. That's on the 3rd of October, at the same time of day. So you'll be able to find the details of that on our website. But,
exactly, and there we can kind of swallow in both the training and the technical details and be all nerdy about it. I look forward to that. Furthermore, it has a broad impact on the wind power value chain. It's not only on the site, it's also pre-assembly. It can be used in so many different areas of the value chain of a turbine. And we actually like the fact that we can we can increase the mobility of the workforce, not only between companies, but also internally in companies. So I find that to be quite something. Because it is an area that so many operates in when it comes to training, then we expect a very short lead time to adaptation from the training providers. They have the kit already. A lot of the time they have the instructors already capable, etc. So we're looking forward to putting something in the market that can kind of go into the pipeline and just flow from day one. And then there's something, I guess, this is a bit out of scope for GWO, but on a personal level, I find it interesting. I think a training like this, there's a potential for cross-industry utilization. I've been part of other training regimes where the training developed in the wind industry was actually adopted by other industries. And I think that's brilliant. Couldn't be any better.
It's a universal skill set.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. When it comes to practicalities, because we always get these questions, so I thought, why not just kind of deal with it in advance, and then perhaps take a bit more of a deep dive after. The trainer to delegate ratio on the theory, it's 1 to 12. On practical, it's 1 to 6. I think it's important here to mention that in the practical, we have a caveat under the duration stating that the instructor cannot maneuver the crane while instructing, and making sure that the delegates are safe. So please look that up if you want to dive into the standard. There's a 16-hour duration, and as mentioned before, 20% theory. It's actually 21.02 or something like that, but it looks better to say 20, right? And it makes me happy. There's also, we try to increase the support for the training providers and the industry as a whole. So we're providing annexes to the training standard where you could use these hand signals. There's a generic lift plan where you can just remove the specifics and put in whatever is relevant for your training standard, for the type of crane that you're using, for the scenario that's being used. And also the equipment list has been put into an annex, which we expanded on. One of the things we're quite focused on is the globalization of GWO. So it doesn't only cover, let's say, the EN norms or British standards when it comes to equipment, but we're also covering what do we need in China, what do we need in North America, etc. These things. Yeah, that's kind of the highlight, and I'm really looking forward to launching this. What we have in addition is that we have a broad list of the learning objectives. I'm going to see if I can move this so I can actually read all of it.
Just as my bad, we're doing this on an 11-inch laptop screen, so forgive us for taking a bit of extra time.
There we go. From the left to the right.
Yeah.
That's a good way. Cool. So what we put in here is actually, and it shows quite well what the Sling A Signaler will have the knowledge, skills, and attitude to be able to. I think it's just highlight the knowledge, skills, and attitude. Those are the taxonomy realms that we focus on when we conduct our trainings. And attitude is really important here, as that is where we find most of our safety parameters, you could say. So we focus quite a bit on that. So it's all about attaching and detaching the load to and from the crane lifting attachment, and also being able to direct the crane, even if you're more, and understanding your role and responsibilities, and of course also dealing with your equipment. I mean, pre and post inspection, you need to make sure that everything is safe. Quite a few of the accidents we see is actually when equipment break or it's used in a harmful manner. So handling is important as well. I mean, sharp edges, etc. When you put it on the load, really important. And different types of slinging, dealing with a good example here is a hydraulic pump, right? What's the center of gravity on that before you want to lift it? So you have fluids in it. You have some elements of it really heavy, others are not. So just looking at something won't necessarily tell you the balance of it. But what's really important is we're carrying out routine lifts in accordance with the lift plan. That's the foundation that everything relies on.
I like that fact about looking at something, you don't know how heavy it is. It means people can see me and they think, wow, he's light as a feather.
Yeah, that would be brilliant.
Yeah.
Yes, excellent. And then we also have complying with instruction and procedures. And that kind of goes with the lift plan, right? Because in the lift plan, you have a lot of different things. But of course, there's always the toolbox talk, etc., and then the equipment. So that's kind of where we are. In addition to this, and we'll speak a lot more on that this next week, we're releasing an updated manual handling working at height module that has been updated individually, but is also being combined, or we're giving the possibility to conduct it in a one go. The reason for that is there's a lot of good synergies between the manual handling and the working at height, and so we thought it would be good to, and our members wanted us to give it a go, and it looks really great. We'll go into more detail next week, but it's of course you have these, let's call it low-hanging fruit or easy wins. So you have different modules put together, so the introduction, etc. You can save that timing. Doing the manual handling exercises within the working at height elements also gives you both purpose, but also a shortened duration on some of that. So there's a really good synergies around this, but we'll kind of share more on that next week, and it will also be launched together with the Sling A Signaler. So there will be more stuff on the website. Ralph will push it out as soon as we can. We're just really engaging and quite busy with this.
Yeah.
So I think this was all for me.
So that's it from Jakob's side of the fence. I'm just going to quickly give you a slide on what's coming up over the next 3 months and into the beginning of next year. We've covered a few things. So what we have here is a sort of color-coded calendar of things that are happening. So in blue, those are the training committee related and audit and compliance committee related projects. So you'll see the Advanced Rescue Training and Enhanced First Aid review has begun. Likewise, a review of the criteria for training providers and certification bodies has begun. And if you look right down to the bottom, the result will be launches of new versions of those documents in April next year. So just to confirm, there is no new version of the criteria for training providers or certification bodies coming out next week. So everybody can rest easy from that point of view. The orange points are events and activities that GWO's membership is involved in. So as you can see, next month we have our first major North America committee meeting and working group, which we're really looking forward to. And likewise, the China committee is having its annual meeting. It's its third annual meeting now. So that's a really well-established regional group. Then it says you're self-muted, Jakob, but please speak back if you can hear me.
I can hear you.
Aha, excellent. So you are going to tell us actually about the latest development from GWO, which is the alignment of the window fee to the UN Human Development Index.
Yeah, but before we get to that, Ralph, just a short report from here. We just completed the workshop with the 12 auditors in Spain, and all of them passed the course. So now we have 54 auditors that have completed the AQT course in the last year, which is great because it means we have resources that are knowledgeable about the standards and about how we work to help us drive the quality assurance of training around the world. And they were very active, and we get lots of comments from these auditors who are very experienced. We have 60 training centers in Spain, so they have a lot of previous knowledge and have known us for some while. So we get a lot of good feedback and how we can become even clearer in what we do and become better at assuring the quality. All right.
Good stuff.
So yes, yeah. So this is a change for all of you training providers out there. We have promised from the start of launching Winda that we would, as soon as possible, revise the Winda fee and reduce it as much as we can and as fast as we can, and that's so the time is now. And in line with our own criteria or regulations, we will now announce it 3 months ahead of time. The decision is that we will multiply the current record fee by the UN Human Development Index value or score of a given country. So we are about to develop the solutions in Window to be able to implement this. Instead of handling just one unit fee, we're now going to handle a solution that can give us 198 different fees. So that requires a little bit of lead time to build up a new backend system, but we should be able to go live and be ready to implement on January 1st. So for those of you who have already purchased credits, be aware that your credit fee starting 1st of January will be lower. So don't buy a lot just before Christmas. Make sure you use the credits that are on your accounts up before. Next slide, please.
1 minute. Okay.
So why do we do this? Well, first, because we promised to do it, and we are not for profit. And the volume and the scale of records uploaded in a couple of past years has allowed us to go for lower pricing. And then we also feel that it's a good signal to the industry to show that we are actually part of an industry experiencing cost efficiency pressures, and that kind of pressure we need to feel as well. And then we're making this decision to use a global index scoring countries to reflect that general cost levels in different countries vary a lot. And I don't think we have on this presentation really the resulting fees, but I can tell you that it will be for countries, the richest country in the world, Norway, it will be 9.53 euros. And for lesser wealthy countries, such as India, we're going to 6.4 euros. So somewhere in between is where most training providers will experience that the fee drops to, and in general it should be on average a reduction in the fee by 17%. And this new fee will of course affect our income, but not to a degree that I'm concerned, because we have a lot of growth in uploads of records. So this new fee structure means that we can still deliver on our promises, given an assumption of a growth of about 25% next year. I guess this is the short story of the new fee from 2020 onwards, and I'm very happy that we can do this and pay a little bit back, or show that we are not for profit, not just in word but also in action.
And it's important to get the news out with good notice period as well, yeah, right?
Yes, yeah, exactly, because since the way the database has been built up is that training providers buy credits in advance of uploading records. There is a chance that there will be accumulated records at the 10 euro price, or people will accumulate records at 10 euro in December going into January, which would be a waste of money. On the last day of 2019, we're accumulating credits that are already on your accounts will still be the same credits. So one credit will remain one credit. It will be the price going forward from 2020.